everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 3 of Scum Villain's Self-Saving System. So, the good news is that y'all on YouTube really liked episode 1's reaction, and there's like so many comments. The bad news is I don't have any comments to talk about with episode 1 because there are so many that my moderators are going to have to go through them. And because of scheduling, I need to record this reaction. Plus, I want to record this reaction. It's going to be, I'm not going to lie, it's going to be really hard to, not talk and go ahead with the episodes and to wait on the comments. It's gonna be hard. Here's the thing. I have the first week of April, I'm gone a week, so I'm missing a lot of reaction recording times. So I kind of do need to watch a little bit ahead. So there may be some weeks where I don't have a lot of comments to talk about. And then when I get back from my trip, it's gonna be like tons of comments. But please do me a favor. Please make my moderators' lives easy. And by that, please don't spoil. Don't worry. I'm going to read the novel after this. I'm going to read the novel. I'll get to go back through all of this that I'm watching a second time when I do the novel. So if there's something that I miss, chances are when we go back and reread the actual story, I won't miss it that time. So please make my moderators' jobs easy. Floor is the moderator for this series. Bless them. Because I was looking at the comments for episode 1 today and it was like, I was like, ugh! And I don't read any of them until Floor gives me the go ahead, but you could just see like thumbnail. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of comments for episode 1. So, which is awesome because here's the thing. I feel like when I was starting Heaven Official's Blessing, I had people in the comments be like, oh, well, Heaven Official's Blessing, that's good, but I wish you were doing Scum Villain. And I was like, oh, I'll get to Scum Villain afterwards. Cut to like 100 weeks later. So I had a lot of people trying to get me to watch Scum Villain and read it before Heaven Official's Blessing. I'm kind of glad I didn't listen to those comments. I am so glad. I'm glad I started with Modao Zushi. Start with the middle child. Start with the chaotic middle child that is such a middle child of MXTX. And do that one first. Get a taste of the MXTX universe, then go to the epically long, sprawling Heaven Official's Blessing that is clearly the youngest child, clearly the favored younger sibling that you're like, okay, you get away with whatever. And then you come back to the unhinged eldest sibling, and you're like, what the fudge? And the eldest sibling's like sitting there with a cigarette like, yeah, hi. I've been here the whole time. So there's that, but yeah. I don't know what my dogs want. There's a toy somewhere, but oh, there it is. But I'm like, I'm not paying attention. They're like, quit talking about Scum Villain. I'm like, never. So yeah, the Scum Villain's just sitting there with a cigarette like, welcome. I've been waiting for you. And I am in love with this series, and I've only 2 episodes in. But the humor is right up my alley. The hidden storyline is getting right up there my alley. I was like, yes, please. And this series seems like one where it's just going to be chaotic tension and I'm not going to know what to do with myself. And that's such a feeling, right? It's such a feeling, especially when it's like an unlikely romance that at this point in the story, if you were just reading and you didn't know this was a Danmei and you were not privy to some of the tropes that have been set up in other MXTX works or Danmei, and you were just reading this as a casual reader, you probably would not think that this was going to have a romantic angle. Maybe the carriage ride would have been a clue, but I don't know. I think it would have gone over some people's heads. So I'm really excited to see what all we're going to get in this donghua before we cut to the novel. And who knows? I've tended to be kind of a weird lucky charm for Heaven Official's Blessing before, where suddenly season 2 was coming out while I was watching and reading the novel. So maybe me interacting with this series will jumpstart season 2 of the donghua into existence. I don't know. I make no guarantees, but I'm so excited for this series. I couldn't wait to watch episode 3. I was like, oh, I want to watch this one. And so I'm pretty sure by the time I get to episode 4, though, I will have comments to talk about, so don't worry. But I may have to watch a little bit ahead so that when I have my week off, then I can catch up with some comments. So we'll see about that. But I have 2 dogs that are extremely needy at my feet. They already got a treat a second ago, so they shouldn't be needy, but you know how that goes. So I've got my coffee. I've got my mic turned on. I'm so ready. When we last left off, our poor protagonist and the villain, Shen and Lo, were knocked unconscious. So what do we go to from there? We'll just have to see. But I'm super excited. I hope you all are as well. But we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get this started here in just a second. I'm going to pull up my stuff and make sure everything is all ready to go and get this set. Huzzah. And then we will get started. So we're going to start episode. We're going to have to skip the OP, so you'll have to excuse me on that one. We're going to start episode 3 of Scum Villains Self-Saving System, little dogs. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. So this episode just flew by. Did it even happen? I was so caught up in trying to break down little bits and pieces of it that I was like, okay, this is going to connect to this, and this is going to connect to this. And I was finding myself getting caught up in trying to analyze while watching that. Then it would jump to the next scene. I was like, oh my God, no. So, we may have a spoiler corner at the end of this discussion to talk about Heaven Official's Blessing and Modao Zushi, because there were a couple things that were making me think of both of those series. We didn't have one of those last week, but this week I think we'll have one of those. But oh my God. So I really like where this is going. The ending of this episode, why? Who's this why is there a random person turning in the cave? Is it them from before? What? Here's the thing. Again, I'm going to be positing theories that are probably going to be ridiculous. I don't want to know if I'm right or not. We'll find out next episode. I cannot guarantee that I will be waiting for the comments before episode 4. But before episode 5, absolutely. But I cannot guarantee, because these episodes are so short, it's so easy to want to binge watch them. And so it's really hard. But in the same vein, I am fully aware that I'm still going to be addressing the novel. So a lot of the comments from the Donghua will probably bleed over into the novel readings. So it'll be fine. We'll make it work. It will be great. But oh my God. So, okay. So we're getting this opening here where Shen wakes up. I also was like not maybe reacting because Shen looked so good in this episode. I kind of love Shen. I might have a Danmei crush on Shen. He's such a bro, and he's kind of stupid sometimes, but then he's also a diva, and I'm kind of attracted to diva characters. So I'm like, yeah, I'm attracted to me a diva guy. So Shen is like the perfect little angle of like kind of corny, kind of diva-ish. He's kind of my type of person. So I'm like, the whole time watching him, I'm like, this animation's not bad at all. Show us some more of that shoulder. Give us that shoulder. Show us that chicken wing, Shen. I'm a bit unhinged from this. But yeah. So Shen, of course, wakes up. We see some blood on the ground. And then he looks up to see where they are. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like, this is the mansion. And then, of course, oh my God, I cannot take Lo's big, giant eyes as he looks over being like, Master. I'm like, Lo is crushing hardcore. Lo is like, that carriage moment has changed the course of fate. Lo is like hardcore crushing on Shen, and it's absolutely amazing, right? So let's kind of break this down. Let's break down Lo and their moments of Lo and Shen in this episode. So Lo is concerned for Shen at the mansion, and Shen is declothed. And of course, declothed in Danmei is not actually nude. Like to them, it's like, a Victorian woman showing her ankle. It's like, oh no, my shoulder is being shown. My least layer is exposed. I'm practically nude. And of course, she's just like, and of course, Ying Ying's trying not to look. And then it says out of character. And it says 50 points deducted. I am assuming that the 50 points are being deducted because he passed out with Lo. I'm assuming. And he's like, 50 points deducted. Why? And he's like, damn it. How could I, the peak master of them, be defeated by a small potato in front of my disciple? I like that he calls the spirit a small potato. That's absolutely hilarious. And so, okay, so the out of character was him passing out in front of Lo. Well, that's not very fair. That's not fair at all, system. What was he supposed to do? It seemed like it was going to surprise him anyway. I guess that's the price to pay for using the easy mode. I'm hoping that later when the easy mode comes up again, Shen will be like, no, I tried that once and it wasn't really worth it. And he won't go for the easy mode. But he's just like, damn it. He's like, it's so cold. And then he realizes that he's like, why did you remove my clothes? Why am I the only one who got stripped? He's like, the storyline is so shameful. And then, of course, they look away. He's like, why are you looking at me like that? And then he's tied up. And he's like, where's my sword? Why can't I summon my sword? And so here's the thing. The one thing about this series that is kind of intriguing is that it's not exactly certain when... Earlier in the last 2 episodes, it seemed like there was a clear delineation between when he was talking to the self-saving system and when he was talking to everybody else. And so it didn't seem like he was talking to nowhere, that the characters just kind of froze while he was talking to the system. But now it's a little bit harder to determine when he's talking to the system and when he's talking to them, because he's mad because he doesn't have his sword. He's like, why are you looking at me like that? And then he's trying to get out and he's like, well, what do I do? Where's my sword? Why can't I summon it? And then he's like, how dare you peek again? And he yells at Lo, but that was very in character to see, like, why are you peeking at me? So yeah, Lo peeking. I'm like, at that point, I was like, yeah, no, Lo has a crush on you, and he's peeking because, you know, his crush is there practically in the nude in front of him. And then she's like, Master, what do we do? I'm so afraid. And he's like, afraid? He's like, well, don't run around if you're afraid, girl. I was like, she got kidnapped. I was like, Shen is taking this being in character. He's like, well, why'd you run around if you're afraid? I'm like, she got kidnapped. She didn't have a choice. Oh my God. And then Lo says, don't be afraid. Master will definitely get us out of here. Lo is so assured of his master and that Shen is going to get out of this mess. It's admirable. If I were Shen, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm glad you have such faith in me, you know, and I'm sure it's going to come back around and be a plot point later on. But I like how Lo has gone from the beginning of the series clearly being kind of down and out about being bullied by his master and the others in the clan. But that one gesture of kindness, these little gestures of kindness, have slowly kind of changed Lo's behavior a little bit. And it's noticeable. It's really interesting. So then the demon comes in, right? The Skinner demon that takes the form. This part was absolutely hilarious because the Skinner's demon's like, can you possibly guess who I am? And Shen is like, are you Dyer, the only one that we've been talked about? Are you Old Man Jenkins? And the demon's like, curses, how did you know? And Shen's like, because no one else has been referenced at this point. It has to be you. I was like, that is such a hilarious play on the trope of like, how do you know who the demon is? And it's like, well, you were mentioned at the beginning of the story. You weren't mentioned again. I'm assuming it's you. And it's like, oh my God. It's just handled really, really funny. And then of course the Skinner demon's like, what are you guys doing over there? And then of course the Skinner demon's like, well, actually I just take the title and body of whoever I skin, right? And so like, oh, the sword would be defeated by me. And then of course Lo, I like that Lo, here's the thing. I like that Lo offers to fight the demon at all times. Like Lo is such the protagonist, right? Just being, and we find out that because he is the protagonist in true shonen story, you know, hero's journey fashion, it kind of makes him invincible. He can't die. He's the protagonist. And I like that Shen figures that out and is like, wait a minute. Why am I dying in this story? I can just direct all the conflict to Lo and he's going to live no matter what. So we'll be fine, right? So Shen kind of figures out that he can direct the conflict to Lo. But that is a delicate balancing act because Shen's going to have to figure out, like, here it kind of works to his advantage, and we'll talk about why, but that's going to be kind of dangerous because if Shen directs too much of the conflict onto Lo, then, like he says in this episode, he's like, Lo's going to figure out and think that I'm, intentionally trying to hurt him out of malice, when that's not the case. He's like, I'm just trying not to die, and I'm exploiting a loophole in the system. So I love that it adds another layer of how can Shen manipulate events in the story. Well, he can direct the bad guys towards Lo because Lo can't die. But if Lo figures out that Shen is doing this and doesn't obviously know why Shen is doing this and thinks he's doing it out of malice, it's going to cause him to hate Shen, and that's going to lead us to the bad ending. So it's everything is this fine, delicate little walk, and it's really, really well done. But the demon says this thing here, saying, it seems like the demon clan dominating the human realm will soon come true. Okay, so there is this thing that the Skinner talks about that I want to bring up. And it's the idea of the demon clan dominating the human realm. Now, if I remember correctly from episode 1, Lo falls into the pit because of Shen in the original version and meets Nightmare. And Nightmare trains him and gives him a sword that can control and conquer both the demon and the human realms and kind of unite them together, which seems kind of terrifying now that we're getting into it. So, I feel like whatever was said there is something we need to keep track of and just kind of put it in the back of our minds, right? But damn, does Shen look good in this episode? Shen just looks really good. The animation's great. And then Shen guesses who it is and is like, yeah, I only could think of your name. Okay, now, the animation on Shen, incredible, amazing, 10 out of 10. Would buy Prince. I'm just saying, would buy Prince. Looks amazing. Lo looks great. Lo's expressions, his big giant doe eyes as he's so worried about Shen and his fate, amazing. This Skinner demon, could use a little work. Yeah, I get that. The Skinner demon, if you are complaining about their design, they do look like my first cosplay. They do look like Spirit Halloween, the goth week on Drag Race. They're not the most intimidating, right? I would say they don't look like the most intimidating demon. And honestly, I think it's the lack of details. Like, there's like a little bit of cracks on their faces, but it's like one little crack. And there's like a horn sticking out, but it's one little unicorn horn. And everything else is too clean, too perfect. It doesn't look as gross as I think it needs to look for like a Skinner demon, right? It needs to look grosser, right? And I get that the Skinner demon is like taking different bodies from different people, but I just don't think it looks like icky enough. I feel like the book is going to describe it in much more detail, and it's going to be a lot more disgusting when we get to it, right? I think that's it. And they're like, well, I'm not very good at hiding, and you guys can't track me at all. And it's like, well, yeah. And then they take their skin right after they kill someone. I do like the animation of her, like, taking the nails and scraping them off and then getting close to Ying Ying and threatening her. Here's the thing. Ying Ying, in the original story, we don't know all the trials and tribulations that Ying Ying goes through, but we know that she eventually ends up in Lo's harem. So, by all accounts, she seems like she's safe, but we'll have to just see where that goes. And then, yeah, Shen kind of discusses, like, what'd you do? You killed Dyer. And then I like that they bring in the real world. There's no DNA test in this world. I like that for that split second, we remember in the story for a split second that Shen's character is being played by a real life person, supposedly. So that is like that tiny little twinge of reality that makes you go, oh yeah, we're in a fantasy world. I feel like there's going to be like little tiny moments like that throughout the novel where Shen, my question is, will Shen eventually forget about the real world and be so integrated into this one that they kind of forget about the real world and that this is a story and meld with the characters? I'm curious if that's going to happen or not. I don't know if it is. We're just going to have to see. They don't know who the skinned victim is. And I love that Shen is such a diva. Like the whole time they're like, stupid girl, why you being an idiot? This demon's dumb. These villains are stupid. Shen is such a diva and is just like throwing shade left and right. And I'm kind of here for it. I absolutely love it. And then I do love how Lo's eyes and the way they animate Lo just glaring, giving the death glare to the Skinner demon. It is amazing. I freaking love Lo. Lo is just so great. And Lo's like, it's okay, I'm going to protect you. Oh. And so the demon just talks about being disguised and wearing people's skins, blah, blah, blah. And then I like that Shen's like, man, this demon's like explaining everything in all this exposition and monologue in person. And then everybody's like, save me, master. And the demon is like, your master's been tied by the god binding thread. So we attain a new item in this episode. We attain the golden god thread that supposedly can bind characters and limit their powers. That seems like an important item to use later. I'm glad we've acquired that. Glad we solved the mission and got to pick up the little magic item at the end. I feel like I'm curious to wonder, is the golden thread, I could see maybe at some point if Shen needs to tie Lo up. I mean, because the thread doesn't hurt you. It doesn't hurt you. It just keeps you from moving or using your powers. So my theories are one of two things. Either Lo gets tied up by Shen, so Shen can explain something to him and he can't attack him. He ties him up. He's like, okay, you're going to sit there and listen to me tell my story now that you can't move and listen through this. That. Or it could be that later on, if the guy that I think is the master villain in Nightmare, what's his face? He's the NPC, what is it called? They call the NPC like task giver or mission giver. I think he's Nightmare. I think he's the bad guy. I feel like they're going to use the golden thread at the end to tie him up. Maybe. And that's going to be how they use the item in the end to get him. We'll see. So anyway, she is like, well, and he's like, well, why do you need to attack, Ying Ying? Why does it have to be her? And he's like, you've told, and then I like that she says, well, I'm not going to tell you. And he's like, well, you told me everything else. I love that. I love Shen's like, you told me all of your evil monologue. What's one more bit of information going to hurt? Come on, throw me a bone. And then, of course, also, I think it feels like a video game because Ying Ying the entire time, Ying Ying's like, save me, master, save me, master. And it feels like a boss battle, like if you're playing a game and you're trying to like fight the boss that's like attacking you, and in the background there's like Princess Peach going, save me, save me. That's what Ying Ying feels like in this moment. She's just saying, save me, master. And she almost feels like an NPC in this mission. And so then that's when, here's this other thing, important to note. That's when the Skinner demon says, if I hadn't failed in the practice of demonic powers, I wouldn't have to change skins and absorb evil essences. I'd be able to do it on my own. This skin doesn't work anymore, so I'm going to use some of hers. So the Skinner demon says that it failed demonic practices, and that's why its power is limited. Another point of contesting, another point of contesting is, I think that in the OG story, Lo falling down the pit was almost like dying and becoming a demon themselves, and then they were allowed to like master the demonic practices like this Skinner demon failed, and then they were able to come back and defeat and become king of all the realms, blah, blah, blah. So it's going to be interesting to see if this Skinner demon knows Nightmare, and if they have connections to Nightmare, and if Nightmare was maybe their teacher and they just weren't able to follow through with the practices. I don't know, because the Skinner demon says it's been a while since I've wore a man skin, so it has wore a man skin in the past. So maybe Nightmare was trying to get with the Skinner demon and it failed, and then they didn't let them achieve the demonic practices because of that. I don't know. I'm just imagining Nightmare is just trying to get like all these like BL booty, and it's just failing one after the other until he meets Lo. Oh my god. And so then yeah, Lo being just such a brave soul, being like, fight me instead. And then Shen's like, this villain is so stupid. She wouldn't tell me. Oh. And he's like, no wonder she failed in her practice. And so I love Shen's just such a diva. And so it's like, how much, and that's when Shen's like, well, how much essence could that little girl provide you? Which is in character. And he's like, you need to find somebody with a golden essence and your trouble would be saved. You wouldn't have to switch skins anymore. And that's when Shen's like, oh shit, I'm talking about myself. I love that in one breath, Shen calls the villain stupid. And he's like, oh, the villain's monologuing and giving everything away. What a dummy. And then in the next breath, Shen's like, well, why are you trying to take her essence? Why don't you just take somebody's essence like mine? You wouldn't have to switch bodies anymore. Whoops. I'm like, Shen, I love that he becomes self-aware of what a dunce he is in that moment. And it's like, you are. Yes, sir. He's like, was I talking about myself? And so then, of course, the demon's like, he's like, no, don't come here. And so then he asks the system, am I invincible? Like, can I legit die in this game? Or am I invincible? And the system's like, no, invincibility is just for the main character. And Lo's like, and Shen is like, well, son of a bitch. No way. He's like, what do I do? Again, when she like does the thing with the hair and we see just like his neck and everything, Shen looks so good in this episode. Y'all, I was totally crushing on this CGI man this entire time. And of course, Lo's like, fight me instead. Leave my master alone. I'm like, Lo just wants to save Shen. And it is so beyond precious. I cannot begin to tell you. And then they're like, oh, it's been a while since I've used a man's skin. And then, of course, I also love that Shen figures out like little things with the system and he makes a boo-boo, makes a mistake, but then he recovers. But when he recovers, he acts like he never made a mistake in the first place. He's like, silly villain. Silly villain. Why don't you attack my other disciple? He's the one that wants to fight you. His essence is just as good. Which is in character for Shen. He's like, there's one amongst us three who's most suitable for being your new skin. And I love when he looks over to Lo and he's like, there's someone that's suitable for being your skin. Like just blinks his eyes and looks so coyly over at him. Oh my God. I'm like, oh. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and make a prediction. I wasn't sure which way I felt about it at this point. I wasn't sure which way I was going to go. But seeing Shen be such a diva, seeing Shen swish that hair, seeing Shen's beautiful pectorals exposed, seeing Lo being so fierce and protective and everything, I'm just going to say that Lo tops. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm just going to say maybe. I'm going to say Lo tops. Just gonna say Shen may not realize they're a bottom yet. They might come to terms with that. We'll see where that goes. That is my prediction. I could be totally wrong. They could be verse. We don't know. We'll see. But I love that it's in Shen's character to persuade the demon to go after Lo. And Lo's like, I like that Lo does the little blinking like, oh, Master, you're gonna have the demon come after me? So this could have gone bad in Shen's favor as far as winning Lo over, because it sounds like he's sicking the demon on Lo to save himself, which is a bad thing, right? But then that invincibility is almost used as justification. And it actually, in this one time, helps Shen out. Because poor little Lo, he like blinks his eyes like, what do you mean it's going to come after me? And the demon's like, oh, okay, fine. You should tell a better lie if you're trying to trick me. How can this kid be better than you who has mid-level golden essence? And he's like, oh, well, no wonder you failed in your practice. Think about it. Many people have tried to join the Heaven Skies tribe every year. If this kid is useless, then why would I take him as my disciple? Now, in this moment, Shen, I don't think realizes that he saves himself. Because with the setup, like Shen offers Lo a compliment in that moment. He's like, well, do you think I just take on weaklings? Of course this kid's strong. That's why I took him on. Which to Lo is kind of like, oh, my master thinks really highly of me. Okay. to the system, it's a way of proving to the demon that he needs to go after Lo instead of Shen. But it all like strings together because then the demon's like, oh, he's like, the secrets of it cannot be told to anyone else. And he's like, go ahead and give it a try if you don't believe me. And the demon kind of looks a little constipated in that moment, which is kind of funny. The animation's a little goofy. And he's like, just hit him on the skull. And Lo's like, oh, shit. And then Ying Ying, like, kind of freaks out, being like, are you serious? And then I like that poor Shen in his mind is like, I'm sorry I'm making this demon go after you. Please forgive me. I'll repay you later. Please don't put me in a pickle jar. Because of this one action. And he's like, I'm sorry. And as Lo's like, you know, Lo looks kind of betrayed in this moment. And then he looks up to the demon. And then as the demon gets closer, that's when the beam falls on the demon so that she can't hurt him. And of course, Ying Ying passes out because she can't bear to see the thought of him being hurt. And that's when the lightning strike from the game, a literal act of God from the game, causes the beam to fall down upon the demon. I love that the beam is solid enough to hit the demon. That's great. But see, here's the thing. Lo's kind of like, oh, well, that was convenient. And it almost seems in that moment like the beam falling on the demon kind of saves Shen, because then Lo's thinking, oh, well, did Shen kind of mean for all this to happen? Did he know that beam was going to fall on the demon and he just used me as bait and knew this was going to happen? The reality is that Shen did not know exactly how Lo was going to be saved, but knew it would happen somehow. So kind of, but I think it actually ends up working out in his favor. The whole sacrificing thing. He's like, oh yeah, it's an unchanged rule of the novel. Once the main character's life is in danger, it will trigger the system's protection mechanism. Although it's not right to do so, I would have died here if I didn't do it. So I think that's really important to know that the main character can't die, but Shen can. I think that's really important to note because at this point, it changes the game. Like, why would Shen push Lo into the pit knowing that he can't die? Knowing that might change the entire story. So, okay. Or, you know, if that's the case, fine. But that also leaves so many options in the future that if Lo is in danger, can Shen find a way? Because it's so weird. I don't know how to feel about it because on the one hand, it takes away the stakes that Lo is going to die. He's not. He's the protagonist. But then the question is going to become, how can Shen manipulate the story still where Lo doesn't die, but also to where Lo doesn't become the protagonist that puts him in the pickle jar? So there's so much with this that I'm like, what are they going to end up doing? I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how that little mechanism gets used throughout the story. Because I don't know the answer. I don't know how they're going to end up going about it. He's like, I have to focus on the bigger picture. I'll have a chance to impress him later. And I'm like, bitch, you're sitting there with your chesticles out. I think you're impressing him plenty. I think that you're impressing him more that you know. And he's like, this is an unusual arrangement to save him. A solid wooden beam was struck down by lightning, and he released himself easily. Yet I'm still tied up, so what do we do? And that's when the demon gets up and is pissed. And then turns their back to Shen, saying people of the heaven skies are full. Okay, and this was the moment that I was like, oh, demon, you have just saved the story. You have just made it to where Lo is going to think that Shen saved him. Because the demon kind of does the work for Shen. The demon says, oh, your clan is full of despicable tricks. What trick did you pull off to frame me? And she's like, you lied to me, trying to distract me and attack me from behind. How could a solid wooden beam suddenly fall and hit me right on the head? And then Shen's like, I'm glad you gave me that alibi just now. So yeah, the demon's words totally helped, like, save face for Shen in this moment. I'm totally into that. Yes, thank goodness. Thank goodness this demon is dumb. He's like, it's none of my business. And that's when they're like, well, how do you think you can defeat me? Keep dreaming. You're still bound. And he's like, well, did you forget that, Lo is gone? And he gets untied and saves him. I'm like, Shen got super lucky in this episode. Shen got so lucky that that demon's mouth was running and made Shen look good. That's all I can say. He got so lucky in this moment. And he's like, are you surprised seeing the demon defense skill for the first time? And Lo is like, oh. And he's like, demolish the demon if you want to defend yourself. And he's like, I dared to ask just now. And he's like, you want to ask what would I do if the beam hadn't have fallen down, right? Because he's like, so I know that this all worked out and I was saved, but if for some reason the beam didn't fall, were you going to let me die? Is that what was going to happen? And he's like, was my crush really not that caring about me? And Shen says, do you blame me? And Lo's like, no. And that's when he says to sacrifice myself for you as an honor as a disciple. And I'm like, Shen, you don't... he's so freaking oblivious. I'm like, Lo is basically just saying, I will sacrifice my body to you to die for you as an honor. I'm totally fine with what you just did. And Shen's like, well, that was convenient. I'm like, Shen, you are so oblivious. You do not realize how much Lo is crushing on you. He's like, well, then let me tell you then. Nothing will happen to you, even if I have to die. Which is true. He says, trust me, you're immortal. I don't know how else to say this. He's like, trust me on that. And he does the hand on Lo's shoulder. And I'm like, look. I'm like, you finally got to have like some contact. I'm like, Shen has no clue what this means to Lo. He doesn't know about the hidden storyline. He has no clue what this means. And I'm like sitting over here just dying in my seat. I'm like, oh my God. And then I like that Shen's like, you've got invincibility. Nothing's going to happen to you. And I like, he's just rolling his eyes and saying it, but he has no clue the impact this moment is having on Lo. Oh my God. And then he's like, Master. And he's like, that's enough. Go check on Ying Ying. Go check on this girl you no longer have any feelings for except for platonically. And he's like, oh, the kid is easily fooled around. He's like, I set him up like that. And he's already full of vigor after some coaxing. I'm like, bitch, full of vigor after some coaxing. I'm pretty sure he's going to take care of that vigor with some more coaxing once you all have gotten out of here. I'm just like, oh my God. Ah! We're going to talk about in the spoiler corner. I'm just going to save some thoughts. I'm going to save some thoughts for that. But he's not going to be so easily tricked in the future. No. And then they're like, oh, Ying Ying's favorability increased and the satisfaction of the main character increased by 50%. Imagine. And you obtained a high-level item, the God-Binding Thread. So you got 35 B points too. And you did your beginner quest and you got 200 B points attained. So then there's this feature unlocked. So now we have this feature where from now on you have full control of your account, Shen Qing Qiu's account. Okay, so I don't know what all that entails. I'm assuming we will find that out in the novel and as we go, but Shen can access things, so that's good. Yay, mini quests, and like, keep it up! Keep doing what you're doing, you oblivious man! And then Shen's like, well, I'm starting to enjoy this game with so many ups and downs, like riding a roller coaster. I'm also like, Shen, don't jinx it, Mother Trucker. Don't jinx this, please. So then, of course, they give his clothes back. And I like that Lo's trying to, like, look away and be like, oh, your clothes, sir. And then Shen's like, oh, shit, I'm practically naked here. Yeah. And he's like, yes, thank you, my disciple. Uh-huh. So then they go back. And imagine this. We have our lovely NPC person that's like, oh, well. And I love that they don't even look at Shen. They're kind of like looking off in the distance like an NPC as they're talking. It's so bizarre and kind of creepy, right? Saying, oh, your aura is moving well. It looks like you've fully recovered from your illness. And Shen's like, yeah, that was a while ago. Thank you, senior. And they're like, how's the result of bringing your disciples off for training off the mountain? And Shen's like, oh, no, we didn't get that far. And then Ming Fan's back there, you know. See, I like the feet are moving in sync there. He's like, I'm glad you're not injured, and there's no rush to train the disciples. We need to take time to make better plans. And so then that's when he goes back to Lo, talking about what would I have done if the beam hadn't fallen down. So I like that Shen in that moment realizes, what would I have done? I got really lucky that demon was a loudmouth and kind of helped me without realizing it. But if I don't get stronger, I'm not going to be able to save Lo in the future. And then that's only going to come back and be bad for me. So that's when Shen's like, hey, I want to go to the Lingxi cave and I want to train there. He's like, I want to meditate and train myself for 3 years. And poor Lo's like, 3 years? And it's like, he's going to train just long enough for puberty to set in. He's going to train long enough for puberty to set in, and when he comes out of that damn cave, Lo is going to look hot. So that's basically what's going to happen, right? Although, I am a little worried about this because I'm like, 3 years is a long time. And Ming Fan, as we know, is not very kind to Liu. So my fear is that during those 3 years that Shen is gone, bad shit's going to happen to Lo, and it's going to make the storyline go awry again. I don't know. I'm just like, I don't know how I feel about that. And of course, Ming Fan's like, well, it seems like a lot for a normal person, but for someone like Shen, it won't be long at all. And so the senior's like, sure, go on ahead. What does he say here? What does he say? Yeah, he says he's the main character indeed. And he's so perseverant with this fake manual. Interesting. So I wanted to say, what did he say something about? He said, I thought that Shen was going to say something about our man with the plan, right? He's like, is it for the God Alliance Congress that you're training for? And he's like, exactly. And he's like, oh, how reasonable. So yeah. So then we have Lo training with his manual. And the fake manual is something that was given in the OG story to like bully him, right? So that he could never get strong enough. But I like that Shen's like, look, here's this real manual so that you can become a better disciple for me. So I do like this being set up that not all of the bad things that have happened to Shen in the OG novel were all the awful things happening to Lo in the OG novel. Not all of them were directly Shen's fault. A lot of them, like the fake manual and the bullying, a lot were done with the villain Shen around. They weren't necessarily things that Shen ordered, but they were things that Shen kind of overlooked and didn't reconcile or neglect to do anything to benefit Lo, right? Because he was the villain. So I like that Shen in character is able to like do these little tiny things to help make Lo a better character and a better person, and it's still considered to be in character for him. I like that. I think that's great, right? And he tells him to keep practicing. So he has this sword that he's practicing with, right? And he's like, that's because your physique is different from others. The usual manual doesn't suit you. That's a nice little excuse there. He's like, practice hard while I meditate. And then he says, thank you. I can only repay this for what happened with Skinner for now. He's like, the most I can do is give you this manual that's actually legit, have you train with it, and then hopefully that will work. Hopefully you'll forgive me about the whole Skinner deal, and this can make up for it. But that face that Lo makes when he like watches him walk away, and when he says, this is the manual made specifically for me by the master. And I was like, oh my God. He's like, I'm going to cherish this. This was made just for me from him. I'm going to sleep next to it at night. And I'm like, Shen, you have no clue what you're doing. Shen has no clue he is influencing the hidden storyline. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Like when he hugs it, I'm like, oh. And then Shen looks back and he's like, what are you spacing out? And I'm like, ah! He's like, what is he thinking? I'm like, Shen, you have no clue. Oh my God, just slay me. He's like, I wonder if I can win him over a little bit and he won't be easily fueled in the future. I'm like, you have no clue how you're winning him over. You have no freaking idea. So he goes to the cave to train and meditate, right? This is about where he goes in. He's like, I need to improve my skills from now on to control the storyline, right? So that's when he says, he's like, what a blessed area. This is the best training ground in the peak indeed. And so that's when he notices, he's like, oh, there's all these sword marks and blood everywhere. What's going on? He's like, why didn't the clan master get someone to fix it? It's like, this is weird. But I like that he's like, I'm just going to meditate, pretend like nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. And he's like, this is the perfect spot. And I feel at peace. I love that it's setting up. It's like everything is peaceful and calm. And you know, just setting up for something either funny or outrageous to happen. And that's when he hears somebody training and there's all this sound. But then he finds this sword, right? And he goes, this sword, which seems like a sword from their clan, right? And he's like, is this my sword? So then we see there's somebody like with blood all over them that's like wrestling something. Okay. And then it's like they're in their undershirt, and they've got blood all over them. And I want to try to get this to play. Where will they show me who it is? Will they show me the face? Will they show me the face? Can I see the face of this person? I'm sorry you all can't see what I'm seeing, but who is it? Oh, it like barely won't show you. Damn it, I hate that. Why won't it show us? No! I want to go back and try to freeze frame it. I want to try to freeze frame it so bad. But this series has a bad tendency to not pause in the right space. So it's somebody they look like, are they tied up? And then Shen's like, who's this? So it looked like it was him from the past? Is it him training from an alternate timeline? What? But why? Yeah, it looks like it might be him. But who is it? Why do we do that freeze frame? What is happening? Ah! I thought I could escape the MXTX cliffhangers. Nope. Not this time, bitch. No. So I've got some Modao Zushi and Heaven Official's Blessing spoilers that I want to talk about real quick, you know, like you do. But I don't know who this is. I don't know if this is Shen from another timeline. I don't know if this is another character we should know about. I don't know if this is Lo from another timeline. I don't know who this is. But we're going to find out next episode, I guess. So, in the meantime, if you're not sticking around for the spoiler corner, I hope you enjoyed this reaction discussion. This episode went by way too fast, but I really enjoyed it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait for episode 4, so we'll see. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and let's talk spoilers about Heaven Official's Blessing and Modao Zushi before we end this Scum villain video. So, there were a lot of moments throughout this episode that reminded me of Modao Zushi. A lot of things reminding me of Heaven Official's Blessing, which, knowing that MXTX took maybe some of the tropes from this story and applied it to this, and applied from this story to those, is very interesting. The whole thing with the undergarments and like the skin exposed and the cave training, all of that harkened back to Modao Zushi. I was like, oh yeah, the skin being exposed, the Lingxi cave, made me think of the turtle cave. Like, I was thinking of all those things with it as well. Lo's character reminds me so much of like a child Huachong. Yes. Lo's character is like, what if instead of Shi Lian being the main character of Heaven Official's Blessing, what if it was Huachong? What if it was them? Because like just the devotion that Lo seems to have with getting the manual when he's like, it's from my master, and being like, and just like looking over at Shen and just like the admiration in their eyes. It's so Huachong. It's so coded to be Huachong. It's kind of insane. The problem and the weird thing is that Shen is nothing like Shi Lian. nothing. It's like if Hua Chong and Heaven Official's Blessing was in love with Shilian and Shilian was a bro, that's kind of like what this is. But I was just like watching Lo's reactions. I'm like, this is basically what it would have been like if we followed along like teenage Hua Chong. That's exactly what this is, which is kind of hilarious. But yeah, the Skinner reminds me a lot of Modao Zushi, as does the whole idea of Shen having like the off the shoulder, having their outer robes stripped. That seems very similar to it. That was giving me all those vibes. And just the idea of how the demons are in this world gives me a very Modao Zushi vibe. Just definitely seems more remnant to that. So what was the other thing? There was a couple other things. The golden essence. It reminded me like the golden core. I was thinking of Modao Zushi throughout all of that. I was like, okay, so Shen has a golden essence, but so does Lo. Seems like your golden core. It feels like just little world building things that MXTX took from Scum Villain and played around with more with Modao Zushi. Maybe. But yeah, so I just really loved this episode. And then the idea of getting the clothes back, the idea of like going to, again, the idea of when they go to visit, what's his face, the NPC. They say his name, right? They call him the senior. And then he grabs a hold of Shen. The senior, again, reminds me a lot of Junwoo from Heaven Official's Blessing. It's kind of insane. But yeah, this episode reminded me a lot more of Modao Zushi than it did Heaven Official's Blessing. But the actions of Lo seem a lot like Hua Chong. They just do. There's no other way for me to describe it. But yeah. And then with this whole cave business, the humor felt very much like Heaven Official's Blessing. Like, let's go into a cave. Nothing bad happens in caves. Except everything. So, I don't know. Perhaps someone got mad when practicing here. I don't know. I don't know who this person is supposed to be. I don't know if that sword looks like it's from the Sky Tribe. The sword looks like it's from the NPC, but why? What are they doing? Why are they looking mad? I'm like, who is this? The freeze frame kills me. I can't. So yeah, who knows? But I guess we'll find out. So yeah, this episode went by far too quickly and I need more information. So like I said, I'm going to look at episode 1's comments before I dive into episode 4. But that's probably about all I'll wait. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'm so excited to hear your thoughts below. And I'll see y'all next week with episode 4 of Scum Villain's Self-Saving System. Bye.